Hello and welcome back to the Curious Kid Podcast. Here at Curious Kid Podcast headquarters, we love animals. We have a dog, a bird, and a bunch of fish. We also live in a wooded area, so it's not unusual to find interesting animals lurking around the neighborhood. When we go out for a run, we often see a cat, and when the cat sees us running, he usually jumps down the sewer drain. We've seen him do this so many times, we've nicknamed the cat Mario because he jumps down the sewer drain kind of the same way that Mario goes down a pipe in the Mario video games. We've also come across deer, snakes, and more while running and walking around. I'm sure you've seen some pretty neat animals around your house too. The animals might be different depending on where you live. One important thing to remember if you encounter wild animals is to leave them alone. This week, we're going to learn about something that should encourage all of us to use caution when around wild animals.
Mailbag!
Mailbag! Hi, Jacob and Olivia. My name is John, age 6, from Boston, Massachusetts. I listen to your podcast every day at bedtime, and I love it. I listen to my favorite episodes, like Curious About Snakes, Bigfoot, video games, and sharks over and over again. I'm curious about rabies, sand tiger sharks, saltwater crocodiles, poison, fangs, and chickens. I hope you choose to get curious about one of these topics. Thanks for making this great podcast that has taught my brother and me so much.
You're so welcome, John. Thank you for the wonderful topic suggestions. By the way, we got curious about chickens in episode 198. Have you ever heard the impossible question? What came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, I don't know the answer, but I do know that we released the episode on chickens the week before the episode on eggs. To learn more about chickens and eggs, go back and listen to those episodes. We are really excited to get curious about rabies for you this week.
Rabies is a very interesting topic, and it's also important to raise awareness about rabies. There is actually a day, September 28th, which is officially World Rabies Day. It's designed to raise awareness of rabies prevention and control. Even though it's not September quite yet, let's learn more about the fascinating topic of rabies. What's the question of the week?
Rabies cases occur just about everywhere except Antarctica, but it's more common in some areas than others. The question of the week is, what are some countries that report the highest number of rabies cases?
All right, Olivia, let's start with the basics. Rabies is a virus, and viruses are tiny invaders that sneak into your body and make you sick.
The rabies virus is unique because it spreads very differently than other viruses, like a cold or the flu. Rabies needs a special delivery system.
Rabies is delivered through saliva. It spreads when an infected animal bites another animal or a person. The rabies virus is in the saliva of the animal that has it.
It enters through a bite, and then it travels through the nerves all the way to the brain. Once it reaches the brain, it causes inflammation. That's what makes people or animals with rabies act weird or aggressive.
And that's why you might hear about rabid animals foaming at the mouth. Infected animals might get confused, scared, angry, or hyper. Even animals that are usually friendly, like a dog or raccoon, can act totally bonkers if they have rabies.
But here's the important thing. Rabies is actually preventable and treatable if you act fast.
That's right. It's important to see a doctor if you've been bitten by an animal that might have rabies, so you can get a special vaccine that gives you what's called post-exposure prophylaxis. That just means that you might have been exposed to rabies through the saliva of an animal, and that you are protecting yourself from getting rabies if the animal that bit you actually had rabies. Even if you aren't sure if the animal that bit you had rabies, it's a good idea to get the vaccine just to be safe.
Rabies mostly affects mammals. That means animals with fur and warm blood. So dogs, cats, raccoons, bats, foxes, coyotes, skunks, and more.
Bats are the animal that many people think of when they think of rabies, because in many places, they are one of the most common carriers of the disease.
Just to be clear, most animals don't have rabies, but it could be very dangerous if a human gets rabies. So it's always best to assume you might have been exposed to rabies if you get bitten by a wild animal.
Especially if the animal is acting weird. For example, raccoons are nocturnal animals, which means that they are active at night. If you see a raccoon hanging out during the day and acting strange, that's definitely a warning sign that it could be infected.
Bottom line, never touch wild animals, even if they look cute.
Speaking of wild, here's a wild fact. Rabies is one of the oldest diseases ever recorded.
It's over 4,000 years old. The ancient Mesopotamians wrote about rabid dogs. Back then, if you were infected with rabies by a rabid animal, there was just about nothing you could do to protect your brain from the virus.
Fast forward to the 1800s when a super scientist named Louis Pasteur made the first rabies vaccine.
If his name sounds familiar, it's because we discussed Louis Pasteur in the episode Curious About Milk. He is the same scientist that developed a way to make milk safer. That's why it's called pasteurized milk. It's named after Louis Pasteur. On top of doing that, he came up with the first vaccine for rabies. Thanks to the vaccine, millions of lives, both human and animal, have been saved.
That's right. So let's discuss how the vaccine works. It actually trains your body's immune system to recognize the virus.
So, if rabies tries to sneak in, your body goes full superhero mode and stops it before it gets to the brain.
It's kind of like if I wanted to poke Olivia to annoy her, so I poke her in the shoulder. The first time I do it, she probably won't expect it because it's not something I typically do. If I try to poke her in the shoulder a few minutes later, she will probably block it or move out of the way because she expects that I might do it again.
So, getting the rabies vaccine is a way of training your body to crush the rabies virus. So if it gets exposed to the real virus at some point, it can more effectively get rid of it.
And animals get the rabies vaccine too. If you have a dog or cat at home, your pet has probably received the rabies vaccine.
It is super important to get your pet vaccinated with the rabies vaccine just in case they come in contact with a rabid animal. In other words, humans generally know to keep their distance from wild animals. I'm not going to try to pet a skunk if I see one roaming around. Animals are far less likely to avoid wild animals. Our dog Chloe has battled skunks and groundhogs in our backyard before. Thankfully, no animals have been seriously hurt in those encounters, and we didn't have to worry about Chloe getting rabies because she has been vaccinated.
Getting your pet vaccinated with the rabies vaccine doesn't only protect them, but it protects you too. That's because your pet would be able to pass their rabies on to you if they do get infected.
That's why knowing about and understanding rabies is so important. Even though rabies could be super serious if untreated, understanding how to prevent rabies, knowing the signs that an animal or human are infected, and knowing what to do if you may have been exposed is really important.
Okay, before we get to Noah's 5 facts, let's give you 5 rules for staying safe from rabies.
Rule number 1. Don't touch wild animals, even if they look cuddly. Rule number 2. Tell a grown-up if you see an animal acting weird. Rule number 3. If you get scratched or bitten, wash it with soap and water and tell somebody immediately. Rule number 4. Keep your pets vaccinated. It's good for them and for you. And rule number 5. Never try to hug a raccoon wearing sunglasses because that's weird.
And it's also oddly specific, but I can't deny that it's good advice.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN at checkout.
All right, Dad, you know what time it is. When he's not acting like a rabid animal, my brother Noah loves uncovering amazing facts about the topics we're getting curious about. Here with 5 unbelievable facts you need to know about rabies is Noah. Take it away, Noah!
Fact number 1. Early symptoms of rabies include fever, headache, and a general feeling of discomfort. So it's kind of like the flu. After a few minutes, the symptoms become more serious, and they include confusion, agitation, and hallucinations. In other words, you start imagining things that aren't really there. One very specific symptom that lots of people with rabies get is called hydrophobia, which is a fear of water. People with rabies will have difficulty swallowing and may even panic if they see liquids. Fact number 2. Louis Pasteur's first patient treated with the rabies vaccine was a young boy named Joseph Meester. Joseph was bitten by a rabid dog. This happened 140 years ago and has saved many, many lives since. Fact number 3. The word rabies means madness in Latin. It comes from the Latin word rabere, which means go crazy. Fact number 4. Even though it's a lot less common, you can get infected with rabies by being scratched by a rabid animal. That being said, it's far more likely to get infected from a bite than a scratch. Fact number 5. In the United States, the most common pet to get infected with rabies is cats, not dogs. That has nothing to do with exposure. In other words, dogs are just as likely as cats and maybe even more likely to be exposed to a rabid animal. The reason cats get rabies more often is because cat owners are less likely to get their cats vaccinated against rabies than dog owners.
Vaccinate your pets, folks! Unless, of course, you have a pet that can't get rabies, like a bird or fish. It's time to answer the question of the week. Unless you live in Antarctica, you live in a country where animals and humans can potentially get rabies, and where rabies cases have been reported before. That being said, there are countries that have far more rabies cases than other countries. Olivia, in which countries can you find higher rates of rabies?
Rabies is found in over 150 countries and territories, but it's far more common in Asia and Africa. There are a few reasons for this, but it's mostly because many of the countries on those continents have larger populations of stray dogs as well as limited access to vaccines and medical care. China, Angola, the Philippines, India, and Kenya are some of the countries with the highest rates of rabies.
Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's podcast number 307 on rabies.
Great job, Olivia, and great job, John, for the episode topic suggestion that made us all a bit crazy, but in a good way. Before we wrap it up for this week, we have some very special people to thank.
We want to thank our newest Patreon supporters, Skylar F., Asher L., and Gage L.
A big thanks to our newest Patreon supporters. If you love Curious Kid Podcast, and you're all caught up on episodes to listen to, and you want more, you should definitely check out all the extra goodies available on Patreon.
Also, check us out on YouTube. You can listen to every single episode of the podcast on YouTube, and there are some extra videos sprinkled in there for you to enjoy too. If you've left us an episode topic request that we haven't covered yet, there is a chance we covered it in a YouTube video and gave you a shout out. So check us out on YouTube and hit subscribe so you know when new videos come out. Our YouTube channel has grown by hundreds of subscribers in the last month, so we are looking forward to putting out more content on YouTube going forward.
We also want to thank 2 awesome listeners for leaving us reviews recently. One of those reviews, from username Lypants, says, "Best podcast. Hello, I love your podcast so much." Another one, from Mia the Scientist, says, "Good."
That's it? Good?
That's it. Just one word. But it's a good word, literally. It's not as good as great or amazing. Do you know a word better than good to describe Curious Kid Podcast? If you do, leave us a one-word review. And if that word is better than good, we're going to totally read it in an upcoming episode. Join us next week when we will get curious about a topic for a listener from parts unknown. Ooh, mysterious. As always, thank you so much for listening and getting curious with us.